Oh man. All right, here we go. Let's watch this.
Hello and welcome to Infinite Sided Dice, where we tell stories and the dice decide our fate. Thank you for joining us for this new series we're calling Infinite Sided Advice. Our goal with these videos is to help you have the best possible tabletop role-playing game experiences. This first series is about creating your very own epic campaign that will keep your players engaged, be fun for the game master, and take less time than you might think.
That's a very important point that he just made. Fun for the game master. You know, I think we forget about that when we're gaming. Is the game master supposed to have fun too? So session 0 is really the game master's way of gaining information from the players about what he's going to be planning. He's trying to find out, okay, what kind of fun can I have with this group, you know? So yeah, that's very important that Dustin mentioned that.
Part 1, we'll be discussing the 10 questions to ask your players before you even begin planning your campaign. Are you ready? Let's get going.
I mean, look at that, quality's insane. The quality's insane. It's so good. It's so good.
Question 1. Tell me a story from your character's past. This can be short and simple. For instance, when I was young, I tried to protect my younger sibling from getting beat up, and I got beat up really bad instead. To something longer, like I went to a boarding school and there was a cadre of bullies and the teachers turned a blind eye and my parents were missing, all the way up to a scripted scene. For instance, "Hey you, get away from them," I yelled as I charged across the quad. All of these are valid and incredibly useful. You might get campaign locations, NPCs, and character motivations. In addition, you begin to learn what kind of player they are.
All right, before we go on to that next point, the character backstory is obviously something that's huge in Cyberpunk. I mean, Cyberpunk has the backstory built into character creation with your life path system. But it's always good to remember that essentially before you even roll dice and use the life path system, it's good to have an idea of what your character's background is going to be like anyway. That life path system is really just there to facilitate that, to make it better and easier and more fun, and to surprise you, really. But when you make a character, it's really important that you have a good backstory that you thought of, because that gives the game master something to work with, basically. You know what I mean? But the idea that something you're talking about your backstory, always remember in our lives, real life, everybody has like one thing that they can talk about that has happened in their life that has shaped them. You know, it usually has to do with their family and their upbringing, where they went to school, what they studied, you know, etc., stuff like that. So your character should be no different. There's probably one major event that happened in your character's life that has shaped their future or their present. And try to remember that when you're making a character. The whole thing, the first example where my younger brother was always bullied and I had to protect him, but I wasn't really that strong, so I would get beat up instead of my brother. Well, if we dissect that, that means, you know, maybe the older brother might have a little bit of resentment for the little brother for getting him beat up all the time. Maybe the little brother feels like feelings of inadequacy because he wasn't able to protect his older brother. And as a game master, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I got to keep this stuff in mind because that's something I can introduce into the campaign. So yeah, always break down the life path. Lanovania85 says, in my group, I am the only one going big on the backstory. 4 pages minimum. It helps not just the GM, but me as well in how to roleplay. Exactly. It helps with role-playing as well. You know, I do have to say, I don't want to knock anybody that doesn't want to go heavy on the backstory. But as a game master, what that tells me is, oh, you don't care about your backstory that much. So I don't feel bad if we don't touch on your backstory during the campaign. That's happened to me. I've had players where they're like, oh yeah, I don't know, the life path says I have an enemy. And I'm like, what's the enemy's name? I don't know, Fred. What? It says he's a corporate. What corporation does he work for? I don't know, Arasaka, I guess. Okay, Fred works at Arasaka, fine. And then I write down in my note, doesn't give a shit about his backstory, which is okay. It's okay, man. Everybody has fun their own way, you know? Maybe he just wants to crunch numbers and roll dice and shoot weapons and min-max his character, and he doesn't care about the backstory all that much. There's going to be someone that does, and I can focus on that player. You know what I mean? It's nice to have variations other than that one quirk of smoking cigarettes all the time. Yeah, I gotcha.
Character motivations. In addition, you begin to learn what kind of player they are. Question 2. What is a lie your character believes about themselves? For example, I am responsible for the protection of everyone around me. This is excellent for getting your players started on their roleplay journey. They might know every spell or bit of equipment or piece of cyberware their character has equipped, but perhaps they haven't taken time to consider their character's internal conflicts. In addition, this can be a great start for a character arc. More on that later.
All right, so what lie is your character telling themselves is really a very philosophically deep question. The idea is that your character doesn't know that they have a negative trait about them, but you as a meta gaming player in the meta, you know that they do have a negative trait. And part of it is lying to themselves about who they truly are. We do it in real life. You know, that's when you have that little revelation. Either you talk to a therapist or you just realize one day, oh, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole? Is questioning that whole concept. You know what I mean? So that's what Dustin is touching on right here. He's touching on the thing that your character doesn't really know about themselves on surface value, but deep down they know that there's that inner conflict within them, that inner issue that hasn't come to the surface. Once again, another thing that the game master can use to make an interesting scenario. He can bring that up to the surface. And it's kind of like a wink and a nod to you, like, hey, this is the time for you to role play those inner conflicts that we talked about at session 0.
In addition, this can be what is a wound your character has suffered, either physical or emotional. Here the player may give you a new life event, or they may refer back to their original story. For instance, I have a scar above my eyebrow that reminds me of the time I tried to protect my sibling. This is great. It means that players are not only internalizing the events of their character's backstory, but starting to think about how those events have impacted their character. This also becomes a great source of roleplay opportunities. Many times multiple characters will have similar wounds that need healing. You can just put them in a quiet room together and see what comes up.
So what is a wound that your character is still dealing with? That's really interesting. That's something that hurts deep. And I love that Dustin talked about multiple characters having the same wound. You know, if they have similar issues with their past, similar things that have happened to them, then I can see that. You know, maybe they were part of one big event that affected so many people, like a global event or something that happened within their city. Then it's something they carry with them for the rest of their life. It would be interesting to connect two players that have the same kind of significant wound.
Question 4. How has that wound affected your character? Are they flawed in some way by it? An example here might be, my fear that I can't protect my friends keeps me from getting close to people and closes me off. Here we give the players a chance to really explore how their backstory will affect their character, and more importantly, how they will perform as their character. This is also information the Game Master can use to create conflict and tension with the character and the party. They show the Game Master these wounds, and then the Game Master can decide whether to rub the proverbial salt in them or give them a chance to heal. Ideally, you do both.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how has the wound affected you is really important. As Dustin said, the Game Master can play with that. But it's good to know how it's affected somebody, because it also tells you as a Game Master what line to cross and not to cross. You know, how close can we get to the vulnerability of your character? Because at some point your character will snap, right? You know, if the Game Master prods too hard, you're left, you know, you're kind of cornered as a player, and you're like, okay, I guess this is the moment I snap because I'm being pushed to this limit. What is your character afraid of?
Question 5. What is your character afraid of? Now, in our example, the player has already described something they were afraid of. In that case, they may just say, see above, which is fine. A little bit of repetition is okay. However, most of the time, this will encourage players to come up with something more tangible. What's more fun than a hero that's inexplicably afraid of rats? Questions?
Yeah, I get it. So, it's not what are you afraid of? Existential dread, losing your life. Like, okay, we're all afraid of that. Now let's talk about the one thing you maybe have an irrational fear about, or a rational fear, but it's just something that not most people are afraid of.
6. What is a secret that you keep that nobody, not even your friends, know? This is a juicy one. Players will give you everything from some secret shame that they carry, to jobs that went wrong that they're responsible for, or even a secret heritage that they keep from everyone. Keep in mind that these secrets do not even need to come out during the campaign to be really useful roleplay tools. Just knowing those secrets will give their characters more depth. Of course, these can also be central plot hooks. Every secret is a potential sword of Damocles.
Okay, yeah, I like that. The idea of your characters having secrets is really important, because that's something that you can bring up later on in the game. In one of my last campaigns, if you guys see Under the Crimson Sky, you know that our Netrunner character had an Arasaka hit team after him, and he failed to mention that to the people that he was with, and the people that he was with were going to be collateral damage. And they very well might have died in a combat situation, but they were able to prevail. And then they, first thing they did was, why the hell are these Arasaka guys after us? What did you do? And it led to a lot of conflict. It led to mistrust and all those things. Good to see you, Brody. It's Black Cubes. Good to see you, Canary Yellow, aka Black Cubes. Thank you for joining us.
Question 7. What is something you've always wanted to do in a campaign? This is a great way to find out what kind of player is behind the character. Are they looking to blow up a corporation or slay an ancient red dragon? Or maybe something less tangible, like explore what it means to be human, or roleplay a scene where everyone cries tears of joy? The point is, if you want to keep a player engaged in your campaign, just ask them what they want. Alternatively, if you're a player and your GM doesn't ask you, tell them. Now, of course, with a bunch of players at the table, they're all going to want different things, and they can't all happen at the same time. But simply by asking this question, the GM lets the players know that they're taking their wants and needs into consideration, and the players, in turn, will be more patient waiting for their moment to come.
Okay, so that's really important. That's something that I do all the time. I have to make sure I find out how my players like to enjoy playing the game. I have to know that, because if I know it, then I can prepare better. For example, you might have one player who likes combat. He likes the numbers, and not only what does he like about the combat is what I would ask. He likes the ranges, he likes cover, he likes holding actions, being creative on the battlefield, using your environment. It's not just rolling dice. Someone might say, I just like rolling dice. Okay, all right. That's one thing to tackle. But if somebody says, I want to be creative during combat, that's something to keep in mind as well. That tells me as a game master that on the battlefield, I better have things that the players can interact with that will affect the combat. You press a button and a big metal gate comes down and smashes the head of one of the combatants. That gate was there because I knew that player likes to interact with the environment. So let's say you have a group of players, all of them like role-playing. They're like, combat is fun, it's nice, but it's not really the main aspect of why we like to play. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have combat in your game. That just means that your combat should have a narrative significance, that every kind of situation that they put themselves in, the person that they're fighting has a narrative reason for being there. It's not just some boosters on the street. This is like the boss of a booster gang that they've been after for a while, and they infiltrated the booster gang, and now is the moment where they're going to take action. So that combat has more to do with all that. Retrophy, hello, finally caught you live. What's the topic? The topic today is how to create your own epic TTRPG campaign session 0 from infinite sided dice. Let's continue. Tell me about your best experience.
Question 8. Tell me about your best experience at the table. This is similar to the previous question, but might be easier to answer for some people. Many times players who have trouble expressing what they want from a game will be quick to regale you with a story. For instance, the time their rocker boy convinced a bunch of their fans to dress up in mascot costumes and crash a corpo party. Or the time their paladin with 1 hit point left scored a critical hit and stacked it with smite and killed the BBEG. Or the time their character failed to sneak into a room and instead set the curtains on fire and caused all kinds of mayhem. All of these examples are clues as to the type of game this player will thrive in. In fact, even if you don't do formal questions for your campaign, do this one. Often you can find answers to many of the other questions hidden within these stories.
Yeah, that question is kind of like a cheat code, because you're basically asking your player, what was the one thing that an event that happened during gaming that you'll never forget? And their answer will basically let you know that that's what they find impressive. So, for example, let's say you talk to somebody and they tell you, my favorite time was when the game master had this big plan and I completely derailed it and went like off the Richter and was creative, and we were able to resolve the situation in 1 second. And the game master was like, I created all this stuff and you guys basically problem solved it in 1 second. You know, maybe the game master would be upset about that. I, as a game master, wouldn't be upset about that, because I would think to my, you know, within reason, I would think to myself, this player was creative enough to find a way to resolve my problems. And it was a way that I didn't think of myself. So obviously they outsmarted me, you know, good for them. So I definitely know that this player likes that cat and mouse game with the game master. They like to have that tit for tat situation. If you guys have seen Inglourious Bastards, that whole scene inside of the cafe or the bar where, you know, they're British and American spies, or American, anyway, they're spies in the bar, and it's just filled with Germans, and they have to basically keep the looks as if they are German. That whole thing, that's like peak role playing. If you and your group can get to do that kind of scene together, that's peak role playing, in my opinion. And maybe there will be a player that would really, really love that. Paul, how you doing? Good to see you.
Often you can find personal lines, any of the other questions hidden within these stories. Question 9. What are your personal lines and veils? If you don't know what lines and veils are, here's a quick summary. A line refers to something that a player does not want to have in their game. This may be because of some personal trauma, a bad gaming experience, or any number of reasons. A veil is a topic that, while uncomfortable, can be included in the story. They just don't want to interact with it directly. Events related to a veil happen off camera, so to speak. I'm sorry if this seems like a controversial topic, but honestly it shouldn't be. It's well worth the 10 seconds it will take to find out what an individual needs to avoid in order to have a good time. Also, it is essential that you ask this question now, before you begin to plan your campaign. It would be a real tragedy to spend a week writing a story based around a topic that a player is just not going to enjoy. Honestly, when playing with a friend group, it's unlikely you'll come up against this issue, but like I said, it takes 10 seconds to find out for sure. It's literally taken me longer to explain this question than it will take to ask and answer it. Now, how do we resolve any issues when they do come up? Well, lucky for us, we haven't started writing our campaign yet, so no harm. But if you have your heart set on running a campaign that directly violates one of the player's lines, perhaps because it features heavily in what one of the other players want, gently explain the issue, part as friends, and be ready to play another game at some other time.
Yeah, that's a big one. You know, I've heard a lot of people say that, like, hey, my table, my rules, which, yeah, that's true. And if there are certain topics that you can't handle, then too bad. Too bad. This is my table. These are the things that I do. Remember, guys, it's supposed to be fun. You know, we're supposed to be coming to the table to actually have fun. And if only one person is having fun, then you're basically playing by yourself. If the game master is the only one having fun, you're doing it wrong. If only half of the players are having fun and the other half are not, you're doing it wrong. Everybody's supposed to be able to have fun. And if it doesn't work, it truly is not working, then it's time to get another group or kick the person out of the group that isn't going to be able to handle the topics that you guys are going to be handling. And I mean that respectfully, kick them out, not kick them out, but ask them to leave, because you're basically telling them like, look, this is how the majority of us like to have fun. And these are the topics that we like to talk about. If it's going to be a problem for you, I don't want to hurt your feelings. Okay. I don't want to make you feel like you have to be forced to sit here and relive your traumas. But on the other hand, we just want to have fun too. So if it's not working for you, you can leave. But if you're willing to, you know, adjust your game to them, and maybe there's a way that you can skirt the issue, you can talk about it without getting heavily into detail. Like, for example, you flirting with an NPC is one thing, but, you know, gratuitously going into exposition about their activities is another thing. Okay. Fade to black is one thing. Talking about all the different romance novel words out there. You know what I mean? I think you guys know what I'm saying. 50 Shades of Grey, doing all that. That's another thing. Okay. So there's a way to handle it. And the best way to do it, like Dustin said, is just have a conversation about it.
Question 10, scheduling.
Uh-oh. The biggest killer of them all. Forget about anything else you heard on this video, all right? Scheduling is the enemy of gaming.
This might be the hardest part. Scheduling around 3 or 4 or 6 or 8 people's busy schedules can be next to impossible. So before you go to the trouble of getting backstories and pouring your heart into a campaign, make sure you have compatible schedules. Well, that about does it for this episode of Infinite Sided Advice. Make sure to like and subscribe. You can also support us on Patreon. Check for the link in the description below. Also, if you have any questions that you think make for a great session 0, make sure to drop them in the comments. I would love to see them. Once again, thank you for watching, and a very special thank you to our patrons. Your support literally makes everything about this channel possible. Special thanks to Brick, Joe Wells, Johnson Detlev, Carl Schneider, MCube27, Rosnall, Scott Gastineau, Anders Martin Helly, Carotene Cardstock, Igor, Jan Schlegel, JonJonTheWise, Mr. Gray Gray, Strive, and the Blackout 00. We look forward to seeing you next time with more Infinite Sided Advice.
Awesome video. Make sure you guys subscribe, all right? Infinite Sided Dice, they could really use the support. They're making good stuff, and Dustin is going to start making more videos like this. So yeah, session 0s are great. I think they're absolutely necessary. I don't think you can have a game without having a session 0. If anything, just to get everybody together to talk about the game. I like to end my session 0 with actual gameplay, because we don't want to get together and talk about the game without actually playing it. We got to play a little bit. And it's okay if it's only just like 1 hour. You know what I mean? We talked about all these characters and all the things they can do and how they can act. Let's play. Let's just test it out. Let's roll some dice. Let's see what they're good at. Let's see what they're poor at, you know, and see what the dice have decided. Retrophy says, that's my line as a DM in every game I run. No explicit XXX. Yeah, I'm the same way. Excuse me. I don't like to explore those topics. I feel like it's kind of creepy and weird on one point, and also there's people have their own traumas with that kind of stuff, so why delve into it? You know what I mean? I understand the world sucks. I understand that there's bad things out there, and there's bad people out there that do bad things. So why don't we just, you know, focus on what we like, which is the game, the power fantasy, exploring social issues, you know, and really just hanging out and playing games together. Yano says, by the way, I'm saying Yano. I don't know if it's Lano, but I speak and read Spanish, so 2 L's together make me want to say a Y. Yeah, it took us 4 months to finish a Cthulhu one-shot because people with little kids. Oh, yeah. So you got to kind of like stop. Got it. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, Call of Cthulhu has some very sensitive topics because it has a lot to do with horror and fear and stuff like that. But yeah, session 0, it's important.